Welcome everybody as you're arriving. My name is Sarah Prosser. I am the country director for Ashoka in Norway as part of the Ashoka Nordic team. And it's my pleasure to say welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to Social Change, welcome to Ashoka Fellowship, and welcome to Reframing Mental Health. The program we have today is first to say welcome and last to say welcome and in the middle to say welcome. But we're going to do that by saying, first of all, spending the first 15 minutes to talk just very shortly about what is Ashoka and what is Ashoka Fellowship for those of you that have come to this not completely clear about what Ashoka is at the moment. And then we're going to have half an hour with Jimmy Westerheim talking about his project, The Human Aspect, and how it's contributing to reframing mental health. And then at the end, there will be a quarter of an hour for everyone to ask questions. You're all muted, so please ask your questions in chat as we go, and then we'll be able to unmute you so that you can ask the question in person. So please just write as anything occurs to you into the chat function. And so with that, let's just start straight away with a little bit about what is Ashoka. This is a quote that we like to use from one of our Ashoka fellows, Jimmy Wales, who started Wikipedia. He said that Ashoka is a living encyclopedia of social innovation in every field around the world. And that's not a bad kind of quote. It's a kind of quote that if somebody says that about you, you think this is a really nice kind of reference point to talk about. But at the same time, it doesn't really describe how we do that and what it is. So this is our definition and how we describe it. We say that Ashoka is the world's oldest and largest network for social entrepreneurship and change making. Bill Drayton started it 40 years ago, and he actually was the person that's now credited with defining what social entrepreneurship is. So at that time, it was really an unknown concept, and since then it's become quite mainstream. We work in three different ways. We identify and support the world's leading social entrepreneurs, and these people are the Ashoka Fellows, and this is the area that we'll be concentrating on today. But we also have a huge network working on cultivating an ecosystem so that all young people all over the world can grow up as change makers. And we work with partners to unlock the potential for an everyone a change maker world for the good of all. And that's our slogan, everyone a change maker for the good of all. Just a couple of reference points at the bottom there. Ashoka is ranked as number 2 in a list of the most innovative social enterprises by Forbes magazine, and the NGO Advisors annual list of the top 200 impactful citizen or sector organizations put Ashoka at number 5. So it's just behind Médecins Sans Frontières and BRAC and those kind of organizations. It's a big, big, powerful and impact-making organization on a global scale. As I said, we're going to concentrate mostly on the fellows' work today, and they are world-leading social entrepreneurs, but we often go back to the original definition by Bill Drayton, which was that social entrepreneurs are not content with giving people a fish or teaching them how to fish. They will not rest until they have revolutionized the fishing industry for the good of all. And it's this revolutionizing a whole industry and really shifting major systems and structures around the world that is characteristic of these people that are the Ashoka Fellows. Another way of looking at that is saying that if we're all living on the top of the iceberg and we're experiencing the symptoms of things, that the root causes underneath them are driven by systems with things that don't work in them if they're problems, or mindsets that need to be readjusted if we're going to address the root causes and therefore be able to make long-term change, transformational change, so that people can have good lives and thrive in their everyday situations. Another way of looking at that systems change kind of approach is like this. We talk about frame change, whereas a lot of people coming up with innovations, looking at how can we come up with a new thing to fix a problem. We would call that a direct service. You can make that scaled, and often innovation support systems stop there. But Ashoka goes in at the systems change and the framework change kind of levels and really tries to help the social entrepreneurs think, how can we transform society by really putting in place new structures and new ways of thinking. So there are 3,600, more than that, of these Ashoka Fellows all over the world. And if you think about that, it's an amazing database of people at the forefront of making social innovation, how do they get that change to happen? And how can we use that database to look at real experiences of how to make systems and frame change? We're active in over 90 countries, and you can see a list of them there at the bottom. If you can then have that database as something to look about how to make social change, another part of Ashoka on a global and European scale is to write reports about that, look at insights from the fellows themselves and tell us how are you making change. And that's the kind of insight report that's over there on the right. We can also look at how we can use those insights with other partners like the Skoll Foundation and McKinsey to write reports like this one, Embracing Complexity, which looks at how can we have a shared understanding of how we can in the future fund systems change rather than fund innovations just to fix symptoms on a short-term scale. And that report was launched at Davos last year. We also have shorter term events like the Changemakers United, which was a rapid response to when COVID came along. How could we get different fellows working together and funders being able to support them and really step up very fast to make big scale benefits for people who are suffering thanks to the pandemic. So the list of things on the left here are kind of the things that are going on a global and European scale. And we have an annual summit. We have we have a lot of work going on at making Ashoka young change makers meet each other and get support. We have some very big global partnerships and lots of co-learning courses and opportunities. If you want to know more about the global scale, go into ashoka.org as a website. Ashoka has websites quite a lot of different places, but it's a very good place to start, and especially looking at the fellows database in there. You can also engage at a different level if you want to be part of this change through something called Ashoka Support Network, which I'll talk about again later. I'd like to pass the word over now to Emma Lindgren, my colleague who is director in the Nordics, just to tell a little bit more about what we do here. Are you out there, Emma?
I am, and I hope you can hear me. I'm not sure if you can see me yet, but hopefully Celia can help us with that.
I can see you.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So nice to be here, and welcome to Jimmy, who is our 23rd fellow in the Nordic region. And it's amazing, and I look so much forward to hearing from you after Sarah and my other colleague Todd have been working a lot with you over the past few months. And Ashoka was established 10 years ago in the Nordic region, and we have 8 colleagues spread out of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the UK. And of course, work very close with our European and global colleagues as well. But zooming in on the Nordics, as Sarah mentioned, we are focusing on 3 areas. The first one being the social entrepreneurship field, where our core work, of course, lies in the fellowship, where we have 23 amazing social entrepreneurs. We have also run 2 accelerators over the past 2 years for more early stage social entrepreneurs focusing on inclusion and climate and circularity. And we have also done quite a few projects and efforts around equipping young people and young leaders with the important changemaker skills. So that's the Young Changemaker program, and we have activated so far around 400 of them in the region, which we are very proud of. And then the third leg is, of course, building the field, both for the social entrepreneurs and also for children and youth to be able to grow up as changemakers. And there we have an interesting project at the moment that we roll out in the whole Nordic region, which is the Nordic Changemaker Map, where we're going to take a health check of the field to see what are the strengths and also the weaknesses in the different markets where more interventions from us and other supporters are needed. So please look out for that. And yes, I think I will end there and pass back to Sarah.
Thank you. Just a little bit more depth about who Ashoka Fellows are. They're really pioneers. If you're in any of these fields, they're the kind of people that you say, I'm doing this, but then they were the ones who did it first. People like Rob Hopkins and the Transition Network. You know, he was elected a fellow in 2003, and now it's really quite a common way of looking at communities. And it's the same with all of these pioneers and social entrepreneurs. In Norway, we have 10. The first one to be elected was actually Johan Kos, who's a well-known face around here. Whoops, sorry. He was actually elected in I think 2003 in Canada, but now he's moved back to Norway. And the first one to be elected from Norway was Hannah Finstad. So they're well-known names in Norway, and they're making major systemic change. And it's a pleasure. I think I know at least Heidi and Luna are here in the chat today. Say hello if you are. The others you'll get to know, I'm sure. Just to say a little bit, the process of becoming a fellow is enormously long and complicated because it's really one of the most rigorous due diligence processes to select people around in this kind of field. It takes almost a year usually to go through the whole process. And I just wanted to pull out something of the selection criteria to say that these people, they run non-profit driven business models. So they're not out to maximize profits for any shareholders. And this makes funding these businesses incredibly challenging. And especially in our impact world, where more and more impact investors, they're still wanting a profit-driven model behind it. And we're really trying to say, Ashoka and our partners want to be able to say that these people are making long-term, really important impact and are scaling it on an international level. And part of what we really want to do is be able to help fund that kind of change in a complementary way to all the impact funding that's going on at the moment. When you come into Ashoka, you can be part of different kind of courses that are taught. This one, I want to just highlight this Government Alliance as a pathway to systems change. We're running in Norway right now, and Jimmy and his team have been part of that. But there are other things that are going on, like social finance, like new leadership, all the different kind of things that you wouldn't find in normal accelerators. The other thing is this, how we collaborate with external partners. We have pro bono support. Vikborg Rein in Norway have been our legal partners and are very important to our fellows to be able to get free legal help on a lot of things, from contracts to VAT to whatever it might be. The other point is that we try and provide a stipend. We try and provide a stipend for the first 3 years of fellowship. I want to say, Jemmy doesn't even know this, but there is a big company in Europe that has committed money to a stipend to Jimmy. We just need to make it up. It's not a complete stipend, and as a global rule, we have to have a complete stipend before we can say, here is your 3-year funding. At the moment, we haven't got a full stipend, and we're looking to make up the difference so that we can release that money to Jimmy. So if anybody knows anybody who would like to contribute to that stipend pot, please get in touch, because it's sitting there waiting to be matched, and then we can make a difference. When it comes to impact, I just wanted to say that 74% of fellows have said that they've changed a law or significantly influenced a public policy. These people are making really big changes out there. But 92% of them have said that a stipend was important to be able to help them focus full time on their initiative, rather than spend a whole time like short-term funding and trying to sort of just survive the next month. So that stipend as a first year and 3-year stipend has become a very, very important part of getting these kind of initiatives off the ground. Jimmy asked me to present. I was going to introduce Jimmy and introduce the human aspect and tell you just a tiny bit about why we wanted to start investigating, and now we've been on the whole journey through to fellow election. And when we started looking out across Norway and who's making fundamental change within the criteria that I mentioned, the human aspect came up as really trying to say that the problem is out there and that mental health needs a major revamp and a major reframe if we're going to be able to make the impact we want to make. The idea that's behind it is that we look at real people and how they overcame it. And I think that's really nice parallel to how Ashoka works. We look out at the fellows and say, how are real people addressing social change? And how can we use that knowledge to reframe social innovation? The solution is a life experience library that can be used by individuals, organizations, and professionals to make better systems and mindsets for dealing with mental health. And the human aspect is a foundation. So there's the non-profit model there, non-profit driven model. It's a fantastic team of the people that I've been lucky enough to meet so far. Many partners, and I've written lots of humans. We're going to hear the whole story from Jimmy, why he set it up. And so with that, I can pass over by saying super big welcome to Jimmy. You are our next special relation Ashoka fellow. Special relation because it's all been done digital, and we can't remove that till we've had an in-person panel, but that will come. I've copied the response from the Ashoka Global Board. And it sort of says, you know, that they approved your election easily and with confidence, and they don't often write easily and with confidence. So that was lovely to see. And that your idea is highly original, it's got global potential, and it's potentially also working with the professionals out there to make change rather than being a sort of one-off solution. But we want to hear your journey, why you set it up, what happened. So if I stop sharing now, you'll hear the man of the moment. Welcome, Jimmy.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to everyone that joined us as well today. So now I'll try to give you a little peek into my journey, and also, of course, the journey of the human aspect, and touch upon a few points at least of what we have done and what we're trying to do, and then hopefully show you a couple of things as well. So let's jump straight into it. The human aspect, democratizing mental health. So the story starts in the hospital in 2014 in Singapore. Obviously, I wasn't born back then. Then I would just be 7 years old. But that was when my journey fully started. I was sitting in the hospital on a cold metal chair, watching people stressed by doctors with white robes, with folders in their hands, people looking like they were uncomfortable, and people looking sad around the corner. And there I was sitting at the age of 27 with a big folder that confirmed that I had shattered a vertebrae disc in my spine, and that I most likely would never be able to do sports again. And I would probably never be able to walk or act properly in the same way that I've been doing before. And for me, more importantly, I had lost my entire identity. So then I started asking myself big questions. For example, why am I here? What do I want to do in life? And who am I without sports? So the big question, of course, is how did I end up here? And why do I care so much about mental health? Like most stories, they start in your childhood. So for me, I grew up in the rural countryside of Norway, 500 inhabitants. Everybody knows everybody. There's pros and cons to that, I assure you. It's a beautiful place. But of course, if you're feeling different, then you will very quickly be left outside. And for me, I wasn't necessarily different because I looked different. I was more different because I was thinking and acting different, and I felt different. I grew up without a biological father who didn't want anything to do with me. I had my ADHD, and I was just a little bit more reflected and talking about emotions than other guys growing up in the countryside. And the problem of that is, of course, bullying can very quickly start. And you can start acting out, and you can start closing in as a person. And even though I was very active, I was social, I was everywhere and nowhere, I ended up then many years later at around the age of 13 of really feeling the loneliness, not necessarily being isolated, but feeling the loneliness. And I quite famously say in my talks that I was sitting in a tree planning my own suicide. And then for me, as you clearly can see that I'm still here. So that was based on pure luck. I had 1 week after I was sitting in the tree planning, feeling like now I don't really see the hope anymore. I don't see any future, because another thing had come on top of everything else. And that was that my mother gotten sick. One of the few people that saw me for me. I ended my relationship with the biological father that was an alcoholic. And I entered into high school and didn't really get better. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is, of course, here is one of the major elements in mental health, the pyramid of burden. On top, 800,000 people commit suicide a year. 16 million people try, which means if you add 10 people to their closest relatives, then you will have 160 million people feeling every year on the massive grief of losing someone, or the massive responsibility of knowing someone that has tried. And in my case, I was close to being one of those people. And then, of course, 800,000 struggle with mental health disorders. 1.2 billion have mental health challenges at any given time. And then you add on to 2 billion people will go through that based on a lifetime. And then everyone go through life, especially now when you add COVID to the mix. Now, I think all of us have felt a fraction of struggles within our own mental health. And then the other pyramid here that is supposed to take care of that burden and be able to then help us to overcome and deal with these challenges is the resource pyramid. Globally, they say that it's 9 per 100,000 then mental health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, people trying then to deal with the biggest problems on the top of the burden. And then below that, you have 400 per 100,000 of the entire then health workers and social workers that could help with the next level of the burden. And then, of course, you quite quickly see that this doesn't really match up at all. And then if you go below that to the additional support system that normally is not counted in traditionally, where you have teachers, HR people, you have more traditional then trainers and people that would be in contact with other people that might be open to them and share their struggles, but that don't really have the power or as seen as part of the health system. And then in the bottom, which is plus minus 80,000 per 100,000, so 80%, is peers, is you and me being able to support people around us when they're struggling. But there is a major but here. Because mental health is operating in the kingdom of stigma, most people facing mental health challenges do not seek help at all. So even though in some countries like Norway, which is on top of these statistics, we don't really use that service, even when it's free and easily accessible. There is a stigma element here that hinders us from seeking professional help, hinders us from dealing with it, and hinders us from accepting it as part of life at all. So the key drivers here, stigma and shame and lack of knowledge of understanding that it can get better. But like for me, when I was 13 years old, sitting in that tree, if I had been speaking to a psychologist, I don't think I could have even explained or put words to what I was struggling with. Now it sounds like I got it all under control, right? When I'm talking about that part of my life. But back then, I just knew that I was bullied. I just knew all those elements in my life wasn't going great. I knew I didn't see any hope for the future, but what I was feeling, I probably didn't even have the words for that. And that is part of the lack of knowledge. But for me, the thing that truly saved me, other than that 2 people saw me in that week when I was supposed to be planning, is sports. Because if it was one place that no one cared who I was, but only cared what I did, it was on the sports field. Imagine yourself scoring the late goal in a 3-2 victory over the rival in the neighboring small town of Setre in Hurum. And then it's everyone giving you high fives, no matter if you're cool or not, until you're back into the dressing room where the bullying starts again. But for me, that was fine. That was okay. At least I got my break. So I filled every waking hour with sports and activities where I could show and at least feel that I wasn't so different and feel that I was worth something. So for me, that take me out of my little countryside town because I came into Athletes College. 2 hours away, 4 hours bus drive, 5 times a week to attend school. That shows you a little bit how dedicated I was to get away from my hometown and be able to start fresh. And that's what I did, and things started getting better for me. And then, of course, now what to do with my life? For me, I was supposed to be a sports star, of course. Then life throws you surprises, right? So the last year of Athletes College, I got mononucleosis, or the kissing disease, that attacked my immune system and made it impossible for me to continue my career at that point. So then mandatory military service. Remember, I grew up in a rural countryside town where being a boy and being a man was supposed to be, you're the tough guy. Big boys don't cry. Tough children just stand up tall and just brush off the dust and move on forward. So for me to really say how I was feeling or sharing any emotion at all was not really fully accepted. So I had one dream to finally dust off what I was bullied for when I grew up, of being that strange boy that was like a little bit too in touch with his emotions, even though I was a beast on the sports field. Those 2 things didn't add up. Special forces, right? Finally prove that I'm tougher than everybody, all the people that bullied me. So I went in there, got through the trials. 3 months in one of the toughest trials in the entire world, broke my ankle. Another boomerang from life. Then became a rescue diver in the Coast Guard. which was fantastic. I managed to hang under helicopters, be able to save other people in the Bering Sea close to the North Pole for the rest of my service. And then I didn't really know what to do with my life again. I came from a working class background, so I knew I had to continue in school. Even though I have ADHD, I was very, very good in school and I kind of liked learning. So I wanted to be the first person to get a bachelor's degree in my family, because then I could finally start establishing myself and start supporting my family and giving back. Now I entered into shipping. I grew up on the countryside. I was in the Coast Guard. Sounded like a good mix. 1 year in Oslo, 2 years in Southampton. Still having that dream of becoming a footballer in the back of my mind, right? With Southampton being a Premier League team. But just after 1 year, I was headhunted by what was known to be the biggest shipping group in the world at the time and offered a full-time job. Baffled as I was, at least I jumped on and took the opportunity and then started the journey that takes me back to Singapore, to give it the short version. Because then I became an operations manager and at one point was the world's youngest at that position. And now I'm sitting in Singapore, living the dream life of all my friends. All the people that bullied me finally started sending messages saying, it's so cool that you got out of the city, you got into Singapore, you're living there, you're an expat. But was it my dream? Was this what I wanted? For me, literally, it was broken dreams. Of course, sorry about the picture on the left side, you see parts of my spine, but it was also a wake-up call for me to realize that this has never been what I wanted. I have learned a lot and I'm beyond grateful for being given that opportunity for 7 years to grow and learn all the things that I'm using today. But this was not my path. So what we do when we're humans, when we don't like something, we go from one extreme to another. At least I did. So I went straight to Doctors Without Borders, the one just above Ashoka on the list, remember, right? So opportunities for development, that's what I'm saying it got me, because I was sent to Afghanistan for a full year on my first field mission. And I got a high position because of my then private background. Coming in there into Afghanistan, learning a lot and experiencing traumatic things and just a fraction of what Afghanis experience every day, obviously, I came back to Norway with a question spinning in my mind that I had since I was a kid, and that is, what makes humans human? So I took my insight and perspective back to Norway, and I ended up going on another mission, still thinking about it, working with then the refugees on the Greek islands and in Turkey and Syria. And when I got back, now I was thinking, why don't we talk about things when we're struggling? Why is it so difficult for us to put words to our emotions and admit that things are tough? Like, for example, with the injury in Singapore or losing my grandmother to cancer and then all the other things I've gone through. Why is that so tricky? And how can we solve that? So then for me, I ended up searching online like most of us do to see if I could find like an experience library, somewhere where I could learn from other people. Because if it was one thing I wish I had sitting in that chair in Singapore, it was just someone coming over to me saying, hey, I was in that chair 5 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever, and now I'm having this life. And if I were you, I would have tried A, B, Z, because that worked out for me. But I couldn't really find that. I found some videos on YouTube, but it wasn't really structured. And I didn't find the help that I wanted in the system either, because I didn't feel sick enough to go for a psychiatrist, right? A lot of us kind of feel that. We're not sick enough to use that kind of help, right? So then, for me, I started the Human Aspect Foundation. And I thought, hey, I've always been good at getting people to open up. So let's just take a camera and go to the streets and start interviewing people about what has been their life's toughest challenge, how did they manage to deal with them, and what did they learn, and then create the life experience library. And the vision was to redefine mental health once and for all, but then through increasing then psychological or psychosocial knowledge, so putting words to emotions and being able to explain what you're going through, but also lowering the stigma so that people would dare to seek help, including myself, dare to then seek also professional help when I needed that. So instead of talking too much about that, I will show you now a 3-minute little video section that is taken out from our interviews, because this is obviously years ago. So today we have more than 600 in-depth video interviews of people who have shared this kind of knowledge that is almost 1 hour long, which makes the human aspect today the largest free digital tool within mental health. And the beauty of that is, of course, we can also make then educational videos. So what you're going to see now is a video that was released yesterday. It's a theme video about grief, the one challenge that hits at us all at one point or another. And you will both see sections from a professional and from certain interviews sharing how this affects us and potentially what they did with it. And you will obviously find the full video in our YouTube channel where you can watch the last minutes of this video. So let's check it out.
Grief is an ordinary, normal human event.
I lost my mom when I was 16 years old.
Bestevennen min ble drept.
And the message will go home and take care of your younger one because your mom is dead.
Having my first child die. It was 3 days of pure hell on earth.
The pain is so much. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't think I've ever felt that much pain in my life because you can't see a way out.
And there are 4 tasks really, and people often get stuck in one or other of them. So the first one is actually called accepting the reality.
Jeg gikk bare en helt sånn, nei, det har ikke skjedd, og de tar feil.
You ain't dead. You ain't gone. I can't believe this is happening.
The doctor told me, your child's not going to make it. Up until that point, I thought I had control. And that 3rd day was the day that I realized no matter if I was wealthy, poor, it didn't really matter. My child was going to die. And there's nothing that I could do about it.
The second task, which is, I think, the most difficult task and the task that most people have tried to avoid at all costs, is feeling the pain.
I did what many of us are very good at doing. I worked a lot. But I can tell, looking back, that I worked instead of grieving or instead of dealing with what had happened.
Da ble jeg avhengig av antidepressiva. Og det var mye på grunn av det at jeg ikke hadde prosessert med de følelsene med Benjamin.
So you can't choose which emotions not to feel. You either feel or you don't. So often people will present it, I don't even feel good feelings.
I just didn't see anything positive. I felt so empty. I couldn't feel anything. I was so numb. And that it just went downhill from there. All the emotions just bubbled up and came.
Jeg har grått mer i 2020 enn jeg har grått i hele mitt liv. Og det veldig fint å kunne gjøre det, men vite det at dette går over.
He just told me you have to feel the pain. You have to stop running away from it and you just have to feel it.
And so in time, it's not that you stop feeling pain, it's that the intensity and the all-consuming nature of the pain reduces.
Den jævlige følelsen du sitter med nå, den kommer til å minske litt etter litt.
I mean, you never completely heal from something like this, obviously, but it makes it easier to deal with it.
Let yourself feel the pain. There's so much beauty in it, even though you feel it's ugly and it's horrible.
I would say don't run away from it. Accept it. And, you know, grief is grief. And if you hide it, push it away, sweep it under the rug, it's only going to bite you in the ass somewhere along the line.
Don't lose yourself in the grief. Don't lose yourself completely in the grief. You still have a life ahead of you. So, and you're a much better person and a much better friend and a much better family member if you're closer to happy than if you're not.
As you heard Sarah talking about as well with the iceberg and the root causes, what we want to achieve and what we're doing with this, not just as an organization, but in the sense of the entire systems change, is flip and empower the resources in the resource pyramid. So now you see on top where there's most people, obviously there's more you and me than there is psychiatrists in the world. So now we're increasing the psychosocial knowledge of ordinary people and normalizing struggles as part of life, which makes me a better peer to the people around me And that is the most important thing to overcome mental health challenges. And of course, with the additional system, we are an empowering resource and digital tool. And as you can see going down, we are something for the entire pyramid, not just we as an organization, but what we have proven to be something new, in the same way that Elon Musk proved that electrical cars was something that you could use as an ordinary car. He didn't build it. And obviously he's not the only one making good ones, but he proved something. And we have now proven that digitized lived experience has a massive value when it comes to mental health. And of course, both in a proactive way, but also as a tool that you can use and that you can scale and that you can take globally. So the point with that, of course, is exactly that, of this being the future of mental health. But maybe you're a little bit curious as well of how we're making those actual interviews. So let's have another small look at a 2-minute video to see how we're making the interviews. We leave Oslo, arrive Copenhagen, smack onto the train, and then we arrive Aarhus and we go to the co-working space called Open by Designit. And there we have a cool guy named Julius. He's also a film creator and an editor. And we ask Julius, hey, do you want to share your story and how you overcame the toughest challenge in life? And Julius said yes. So then Uni, one of our film photographers, filmed Julius together, where I interviewed him about his challenges. And when we were finished, Morten did the color editing and graded, of course, the sound and make sure that the raw files are up to speed. And he sent it into the beautiful Drive cloud. At Mesh in Oslo, we have our chief editor, Darta, sitting and waiting for the files. She downloads the files, and now she starts looking at Julius' story, and she cuts and edits the story into the finished interview.
Important things we keep in mind when we edit the interview is that we want to keep it as real as possible, which means that we try not to edit too much. At the end, we try to not to like manipulate things, or we try not to make things sound as they're not. We respect the subject, we respect the people that have been interviewed, and we want to tell their story, not our story. Yeah, that's what we do here when we edit interviews.
And of course, when she's finished, she uploads it back into Vimeo. In Denmark, we are sitting eager and waiting for this interview. So when we get it back, we send it to Julius for his approval. He goes through, he gives maybe 2-3 comments, and I go straight into the tool. And then now Morten can, here in Denmark again, do the final changes. And now we press render, and the beautiful finished project that maybe you're a little bit curious to see comes back out. You want to watch it? Let's press play and be the first ones to see the human aspect of Julius. So as you can see, there's a lot of effort that goes into producing every single interview, and we have more than 600, as we said. And then of course, you also have, how did we take it from idea to global movement? So from idea to launch, it just went 3 months from where I took that camera, took a friend, and started interviewing random people on the streets with zero budget, of course. And that was also the strategy, get it out live, find an organization that is willing to do it pro bono for you. So we found a big digital agency that wanted to support us, so we could start getting live feedback and develop it in the market, which is a bit different strategy than building an MVP, getting feedback, and then so on. Straight out and large start people giving us feedback so we can develop something for people, not come up with a solution on what is a good element ourselves. And then, of course, as you've heard a small fraction of my own life story, I merged 3 worlds, business, sport, and humanitarian, to create synergies in how I personally thought we should drive and build up an organization, but also take care of a team. Sarah also said that she thought our team was a great team. Obviously, I am biased, but I'm saying that as well. But it's been an extremely dedicated team that has been between 1, I started it, And now 1,000 people have actively been involved in the last 4 years. So we created a massive engagement around what we were doing, from people doing small fractions to sharing their story to working here for 4 years, like you saw Darta in the video. She's been here for 4 years, starting off as a volunteer in the beginning and building this together with me. And then, of course, finally taking over the video quality that, thank God, I have nothing to do with at the moment. So that is left over to the people that love that and know how to do it as well, which is the synergies in the team. We have reached more than 100 million people since we started in 2016 on social media, obviously. And we have had users and still have users in every country in the world already in 2019. So that says something about the reach that is possible to get when you're making something as human as we are doing. And then, of course, combination of marketing power and community work created the social media synergy that made it possible to reach 100 million people without massive funding. And then, of course, being able to get other people to share your content, it needs to be real, it needs to be human. And there we were spot on. And of course, timing is always an essence of this. So now we have from 750,000 library users in total, which is, of course, is a proof of concept. We were doing something new, digitizing lived experience. Then you also have to prove to the world that it actually works. So that's like why we pushed it into the market so early, because we wanted to prove to all the skeptics that it is possible, even in 2021, to get people to watch 45 minutes of one person talking, if it hits them, if it is relevant. So in the library, where you can search for any category and find people from more than 80 countries around the world, you can then find that story that you connect with. Or you just follow us on social media and you get that daily inspiration with videos like you saw now. And suddenly when you get that video that hits you a little bit more, then you press the link that is right in front of you, obviously, either a swipe up or a link, or you can go and watch the YouTube videos just to learn more from other people. And in that way, we managed also to build other products around. But that is just the human aspect, right? So how to inspire systems change? This is great that we have done this, and it's a massive tool, and in some countries is the only tool. When we went to Sierra Leone, one of the countries in the world with the least, they have one psychiatrist for 7.8 million people. And of course, they don't necessarily have a good system around them at all, and massive stigma around mental health. In Sierra Leone, the 10 interviews we did there, plus the entire library, is probably the only real tool they have, in addition to a couple of organizations doing some small projects here and there. But how do we change the system? How do we flip that pyramid upside down? How do we go into that? And this is where we started 2 years ago, working very closely on identifying the different actors in the world. So basically mapping out the pyramid that you saw, but in society, to find out which elements meet us the most. And in the bottom, you have, for example, an office where most of us adults spend most of our waking time, and you have the school where then students and younger people spend their time. So if you manage to get into those two places and get them to put a focus on mental health, but also from a lived experience point of view, instead of having a psychiatrist coming in speaking about psychology and neuroscience and things that potentially isn't that relevant in everyday life. That's exactly what we did. Started developing user guides on how to use digitized content in their work. Of course, using ourselves and our free interviews as what you could have as examples in there, but it could have equally been a video that someone else made, as long as it was open enough and touching upon the same elements as we do. And then, of course, as we said, you have to be part of the educational system. Everyone knows if you want to make a massive change and redefine mental health, it's quite a massive vision, saying that we want to change the narrative. Because today, and I think if you're honest with yourself, maybe you have the same definition. If I say mental health, the first thing that comes to your mind is something negative. depression, anxiety, OCD, bipolar, schizophrenic. But mental health is a neutral word in the same way as health is a neutral word. So the big question here is, we all have mental health, but is it good or bad today? And how is it going to be tomorrow? And how is it long term? How is it short term? What can you do to improve it? What can you learn from others in sense of feeling that? And we wanted to change that narrative. And then obviously starting in schools is essential. So that's why we made a special project where we have tested it, obviously, as you can see on this picture, then allowing students to watch videos and get an introduction, and then also increase their knowledge, like we said, but also lower the stigma collectively in an entire school at the same time. Because then when they walk around, suddenly they will know that everyone has seen the same. And then it isn't that stigmatized anymore to go through these things. And then, of course, we need to provide the teachers with user guides on how they can use our massive library of content easily, but also adapted to the rules and regulations and guidelines that they have on what they can do within the framework of the educational system. And then, of course, eventually pushing the educational system to take mental health more and more in. At the same time, we're giving digital talks, and we're doing the same with businesses, the other massive block in the bottom. And then, of course, being a tool for everyone on top of the system. But it is in the bottom where you can make the massive change. And that's when you will flip it around, and everyone will start seeing mental health as something that is part of life that they can do something about. And then you also need to continue improving yourself and innovating yourself and getting out and about where people are. So this is a picture of the latest project that we have done that is called the Portrait Project. And then, of course, the reason why it is called that is obviously because it's beautiful portraits, but it's also a link, as you can see under there, there's 2 QR codes, one QR code that is leading to the actual person on the image, not just a celebrity saying, hey, your mental health is important, press this button, and then you will get somewhere else. No, you will get more of the person that stopped you and connected with you on the street. And the other QR code leads to an overview of the help in your area. So the help that you could reach out to, and then lowering the threshold once again, and then redefining what it is by being out there where people are, in addition to social media, of course. And of course, we have just started, and now we're also lucky enough to be part of Ashoka Fellowship, where we are able to connect with then fantastic social entrepreneurs around the world that potentially also could attach and collaborate and do things and push towards the same change, but also learn new skills and things that could help us on our journey. And of course, you are a very important part of that journey as well, by just engaging, giving us feedback, sharing the content, talking to us about, for example, having businesses that would need talks or anything that you could come up with that could be part of changing this system. So thank you so much for listening to the speedy up version of my life and what we're doing, and a little bit of where we're headed. And then, of course, now it's supposed to be some questions. Yep. And this is, of course, where you can find us as well in all social media, The Human Aspect, or Jimmy Westerheim, the only one with that name. So it's quite easy to find. And if you have any questions that you want to ask now, then Sarah will take over. And then, of course, you could always send them directly to me as well. Look forward to hearing what you have to ask.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. That was brilliant. Heidi's saying welcome. That's Heidi Wang, who's one of the earlier fellows that we had here. And we've got a question from Frederick Leroy. Did you want to ask it yourself, Frederick? Shall I read it out? I think. Well, let's see if we can. If you've got a voice, go ahead. Just go ahead to me. Okay. It says, bravo, Jimmy, that's impressive work and so inspiring. Where do you get your funding from, and is it a free resource?
Yes, it is a free resource, and it always will be. It's kind of then integrated into the statutes of the foundation. So it will always be free to the users. Of course, for professionals and other tools that can be built around it, there will be opportunities for subscriptions and things and models that will be able to carry us into the future as well. And today's funding it's, to be honest, it mainly comes from a massive amount of volunteer work. The amount of hours that have been put in, just to put it in perspective, it was 29,000 hours that was spent in 2020 alone. So in 1 year, almost 30,000 hours of volunteer work was put into the human aspect. But of course, we also had Facebook supporting us through their grant system. We had a foundation called the Kavli Trust that also supported us. And we had partners, which is part of the system change, that is working on one field, that supported us to be able to make more interviews about the category they really work with, like, for example, abuse or ADHD. And then we managed to make more interviews of that. So we have found different structures. And then, of course, we are then taking money as well for giving big lectures or then digital talks to companies as well, like I mentioned earlier. So it is, of course, different elements in how we survive. Like Sarah said, it's tricky. So then we have had to be very creative on that side as well to ensure that the tool will always be free, because we refuse to move away from that, not just because we are idealistic, but also because we believe that that is necessary to be able to actually make the systems change and not just a fraction change. I don't want to be part of another thing that is just for the people with a lot of resources, because it goes against my personal values. It goes against what I've seen, but in general, it also goes against what I think is the best strategy to be able to actually make systems change in this very tough field of mental health.
And I think
Thanks
that's
for the question.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things where we have to really make sure we raise the voices of all the Ashoka Fellows in the Nordics to show the importance of how the Nordic countries can be at the forefront of funding systems change. And I think, you know, how the public sector can procure for systems change is going to be one of the big areas of innovation that coming up. And it's really exciting to have such strong examples now. So we've just got to make sure it happens. There's a question from Kelly Kim here. Who I'm slightly worried that we booked our Zoom sessions till 5 o'clock. So if we suddenly get cut off at 5 o'clock, then it was lovely seeing you all. But let's just see if we can get another couple of really quick questions in before then. Kelly asks, she's wondering how, she's a master's student in organizational psychology and wondering how you impact organizations positively. They showed that by learning works, we showed how the learning works in the school, but wonder how collaboration with corporates has been going.
It's basically the same thing. We go in both having digital talks where we share insights, but also showing them how they can utilize the free resource in their HR work. So how would an HR person, how would a leader be able to utilize this library when they're then trying to support their employees? So we're going structurally into an organization, both in small things like a digital talk, but also then bigger collaborations over time where we work together with them, because they know obviously their company better than we do, but we then potentially know mental health and then lived experience better than they do. And we collaborate to make a better culture, and especially a more psychologically safe and open environment, which is kind of the core, for example, behind what Amy Edmondson, the famous organizational leader, is saying.
Thank you. And there's a question here from Annika, who is one of our Ashoka support network people, and I think was part of your panelist as well. It's one of the ways of engaging with Ashoka, and you get to meet people as part of that panelist experience. But Annika also does amazing things for mental health in Sweden with young people, and she's asking how you are integrating your concept into other organizations that are working within mental health space, such as clinics and schools.
So again, then we're kind of collaborating with them, showing, like, for example, how a psychiatrist or a psychologist in one-to-one sessions could utilize lived experiences, digital ones, as part of, for example, homework. Like I said, one of the key things here is that a lot of people coming into the psychologist don't necessarily know how to frame what they're struggling with. We don't have the proper language. That could take up to 5-6 sessions to establish that both trust, but also the language barrier of getting the psychiatrist or psychologist to understand before we can even start working with the challenge. So the interviews will be able to help the person to frame better, and then could point at the video saying, yes, like Jimmy said in his video, I also feel X, Y, Z. And then they will be able to come quicker to a point where they could start working on it. And as you saw in the resource pyramid as well, we have limited resources. We can't magically just wave out new professionals, right? So we also need to make professionals more efficient without losing the human touch, which is almost impossible, right? Because we can't start making sessions shorter and efficient methods, then the whole point will disappear because it's dependent on trust and social connection. But if we manage to then skip those elements that are not necessary, like for example, 5 sessions to be able just to say what you're going through, then we can actually efficientize in what we think is a healthy way. And then as you saw in the pyramid, we will do the same for nurses, for doctors, for then environmental therapists, for experienced consultants and teachers, trainers, all kinds of professions. And those guides will be free and will be downloadable at one point then in several languages as well, of course. So then it will be able to be used all over the world with then probably some simple instructional videos and simple elements on how to be able to do it. And the goal, of course, is making this interactive as well in the future, but that's a little bit ahead.
It's 5 o'clock now. Do you want to see if you can do some really short fire answers on these last questions and see if we can get them answered? One is, oh, I had it a minute ago. Are you working with decision makers?
Huh?
Are you working with decision makers?
Yes, of course. We're working very heavily politically as well, both to impact them in general and share our insights, because a lot of people obviously reach out to us with what they feel. But also in general, we're working very structurally towards big CEOs. We had in one of the YouTube episodes, we had the Prime Minister and the head of the 2 biggest companies in Norway. They were part of our podcast. So we're trying, of course, as well, like any other organization who wants to do big systems change, to both learn from them, but also kind of share our knowledge with them. And then, of course, then try to impact them on helping us along the way, because there are engaged people there. They're not necessarily bad people. They just not always know how to make the systems change that they want. And then we can try to inspire them and then also push them a little. You know, we can't just only be nice with them as well. We have to say what we see and what we think could improve it.
Thank you. That was from Maxime, who was also asking actually who your main target group is. Your main target group, who would your main target group be?
Every interview has different target groups because it's a different category. So an interview about depression will be for then the people struggling with that, working with that, or people that are next to kin of that, of course. So basically at the moment, our core user group is between 18 and 45, but we have users up to 80, and we have users obviously down to probably 11, 12, because we already know it's being used in secondary school as a learning tool. So we know we have users all over the plate. And like we said, we have users in every country as well. So it's quite a massive user group, obviously.
I see in the chat that Kaylee from the Human Aspect has said that she's made a note of all the questions and will be happy to reach out after the call. So I think we should end there just to try and be on time. But thank you so much for all your questions. Thank you so much, Jimmy, most of all. I mean, I love the flipping the pyramid. I think we can all go back and think about the visual of flipping the pyramid when it comes to reframing mental health. And I really look forward to how we see the human aspect and the impact and the importance of it for everyone, really making a difference over the next few years. So I think with all that, I can only say welcome one last time. And from now on, it's business and impact as usual. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much to everyone listening, and have a fantastic day. Look forward to hearing from you if you have more questions or any other feedback as well. Just reach out directly also.